Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
Joining me now is literally one of the smartest guys I know when it comes to not just U.S. but world politics. Hank Sheinkopf has worked in over 700 political campaigns on 4 continents and in 14 foreign nations. His political clients have included President Bill Clinton, New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, Leonel Fernandez, former president of the Dominican Republic, and the president of Mexico, Vicente Fox. Let me put it to you this way. I've worked with Hank Sheinkopf, and I've worked against him, and you don't want to work against him. Dr. Sheinkopf, thank you so much for joining us on The Roger Stone Show.
Well, I'm very grateful for your kind introduction, which is kind of embarrassing, but I'm always happy to be with you, Roger.
Well, Hank, the thing I respect about you is, I come on this show and I criticize Republicans and Democrats. I'm a partisan, sure. I have a sentimental attachment to the party of Eisenhower and Goldwater and Nixon and Reagan and, of course, Trump. But I have plenty of criticism for Republicans like Cheney and McCain and Adam Kinzinger and others. The thing I like about you, Hank, is you always tell it straight. You never color your analysis with your own feelings. And that's a very rare thing. It's very hard to find. So we're honored to have you today. And of course, the question on the table is what will happen in next Tuesday's election? How do you see this shaping up?
It's a very odd election, but in some ways, in other ways, not, because the American political system is everybody's kind of in the middle, Roger. People think they're on the extremes, but they're really not. They're somewhat confused. But I would bet the following: that the Democrats lose the Senate 52-48 at least. Okay, the Republicans have a significant edge. I would bet that in the popular vote, that the Democrats take back the House. Not by big numbers, but by enough. And I think reproductive rights are going to be issue in a lot of the suburbs, not in New York State necessarily, but other places where congressmen are going to be. That'll just be, and it won't be a significant number because it hasn't been of late. Probably hasn't been for a long time. And the presidential campaign will hinge on what occurs in places that the world has never heard of. That the most powerful person in the history of the universe, of the richest nation in the history of the world, and the most powerful military nation in the world that person will be chosen by voters in a place called Montgomery County, Delaware County, in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania. And that is really, what it gets down to in my hunch. And I think that it will probably be Harris by a hair on reproductive freedoms is my bet. Or it'll be Trump by a hair because the Jews in those part of the country will vote for Trump on Israel-related issues. That's how close I think this thing is. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I see it today.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. If you go by the polling, which we both study like, maniacs, because we're junkies at this stuff. Less so the modeling, because I'm never really confident. You never know what goes into the modeling, You have all these famous modelers who are making predictions, but this, I said this earlier in the show, for any Republican or Trump supporter who thinks this is some kind of runaway, some kind of landslide, some kind of, Trump has it in the bag. That's not what I'm seeing. I do think he has run a better campaign than she has. I do think that he has run a more substantive campaign that he has. But like you, I see it being extraordinarily close. If in the end she loses Pennsylvania, but wins Michigan and Minnesota, then folks will say, well, had she taken Governor Josh Shapiro for vice president instead of Tim Walz, she might have won. On the other hand, if she had taken Shapiro, I wonder whether she would have been able to win in Michigan and Minnesota with the very large Muslim American populations, which have traditionally been very active in Democrat Party politics. That one decision here really could be determinative in the way this comes out.
I think that's well said. I don't think that I don't believe the Democrats win Wisconsin. Maybe I'm stupid, but I keep hearing about these and watching these Tammy Baldwin, the anti-Tammy Baldwin campaign. I worked in Wisconsin years ago. Yeah, it's a place where spearfishing upsets people in the North Country, Wisconsin. They want to kill the indigenous American Indians, right? Because they spearfish. I mean, you're talking about a very different kind of a state than people in the West and the East Coast think exists. And the Tammy Baldwin, the campaign against her for being a lesbian and living with her girlfriend in New York and calling her the third senator from New York, has legs in most of that state. So I'm not sure that the Democrats win Wisconsin. Minnesota, not enough there to make it work. I mean, Michigan is the problem. I worked there for many years. But the presumption that the elites on the East and West Coast seem to have is that Michigan, the UAW, really controls the vote. That's not true. Most of the people in the UAW are not great wild liberals. They are guys who like their country homes, right, where they're making a buck, right, and they like their shotgun in the back of that truck, and they like the boat attached to it that goes up the Upper Peninsula or wherever they're going to get away as far away from Detroit as they can. And the resentment because of the destruction of Detroit, the destruction of the auto industry is huge. So I wouldn't bet that's a done deal for Harris. And I may be wrong about that, but for those reasons, although I mean, years back, I did the in-state campaign for the UAW for Gore and Lieberman in 2000, and we won it by a hair, and their values were out of sync with the bulk of the population there. So it can be done, but it doesn't feel right. But, Ohio, forget about it. That's over. Sherrod Brown may be out of work too. But coming back east, it still gets down to that Keystone State, I think. And people are misreading Pennsylvania as well. They see it as a monolith, and they somehow believe Philadelphia overpowers the voting outcomes. Not true. Proportionally, as you know, Roger, more people turn out in western Pennsylvania than the east. Proportionally, that the hatred of Harrisburg and Philadelphia by western Pennsylvanians is significant and unending. And that the only balance that offsets that is what goes on in the Philadelphia suburbs. And Trump's rally, the comments by the comedian about Puerto Ricans may impact the Lehigh Valley, where you have a significant number of new immigrants living there who are powering the gaming industry and other things that are going on, and rebuilding those old industrial cities in the Lehigh Valley. So it is anything can happen. That's what I really believe it's in the east, and maybe I'm wrong. Delco, Delaware County, Montgomery County, Philadelphia suburbs, and Lehigh Valley. And what the turnouts are will be. You can project turnouts and do modeling all day long, but how angry are people, or how motivated are they? People don't motivate to vote, as you know, by love. They motivate oftentimes by just dislike and distrust and a gut feeling that things need to change or something needs to be done. So that's how I see it today.
Yeah, my old friend Arlen Specter, who was the only four-term senator in Pennsylvania history, we used to argue endlessly about the Warren Commission and his single bullet theory, but putting that aside, he summed this up by saying, the people in western Pennsylvania hate the people in eastern Pennsylvania, and the people in eastern Pennsylvania are ambivalent about the people in western Pennsylvania. And I think that sums it up. Some of this data does indicate to me that the economic issues have allowed Trump to make inroads into those collar counties around Philadelphia, Bucks, Montgomery, and so on, where, as you know, those counties, once Republican strongholds, have been trending Democrat in more recent years. This is for sure. The Republicans, including many friends of mine, have poured more resources into the Keystone State than I think any other state. A massive grassroots voter registration and now chasing the Pennsylvania ballots. My good friend Cliff Maloney has been living, on the ground there. Also Scott Pressler, the great folks at Turning Point USA. This is old-fashioned grassroots, shoe leather, knock on doors politics. You don't see it that much today. As you and I both know, the whole system has become so automated. You used to go to the Republican or Democrat headquarters and you could volunteer by stuffing envelopes and addressing envelopes to voters. Today, of course, all those things are done by computers, just using that as an example. Phone banks, well, they're all automated today. There's no human involvement other than maybe the original recording, and even that's pretty much done by AI. So they've taken the people out of politics in a very strange way. How much stock do you put in these early voting totals, which of course can only be read by party? We don't know how people actually voted, but we do know their party. I think people are so anxious that they tend to look at these numbers, but I'm not sure how much to read into them. How much do you think we should read into them?
I don't think you should read into them very much at all. It's kind of like I've become very cynical about those kinds of stats, and I've become very cynical about polling generally, because as you know, Roger, obsessives like us look at this stuff and we say, wait a second, this doesn't quite fit. And what doesn't fit in my hunch about what's happened the last several cycles, election cycles, is that people are buying their samples. Pollsters are buying samples, which they need, from the same sample houses and talking to the same people and getting the same false positives or false negatives. So I think it becomes more about actual people rather than polls. And you're right. Economic issues are tending in that state probably to assist Donald Trump. Reproductive rights issues are tending, of course, across the country to assist the Democrats. But people are wary, and Donald Trump has run a much better campaign in many ways, more emotional, more evocative. And this has now become not about Kamala Harris so much, but about people's feelings about Donald Trump. And is there enough goodwill that they, or the sense that they need him because of the economics to change the entire discussion? And that may be the case. If that's the case, she loses and he wins. Unquestionably so.
It is an anomaly that, in a strange sense, obviously, a presidential election is about the performance of the party in power. But by forcing the withdrawal of Joe Biden, in a way, she has succeeded in making the race a referendum on Trump. On the other hand, two things surprised me. One, that the party of Truman, the party that founded Israel, will not stand up for Israel. And this delicate balancing act that they seem to be trying to do, giving $190 billion plus to a rogue regime in Iran that turns around and uses that money to finance Hamas and Hezbollah and their terrorist attacks on Israel, as well as restarting their nuclear weapons program. At the same time, we should be standing up for our only democratic ally in the region, Israel, puts them in a very strange position.
Yeah, that's true. You look, we know from previous studies that I think it was Schlesman, Verber, and a whole bunch of other people that have major studies some years back on why Americans vote and how they vote. And what they found was that Americans tend not to vote on foreign policy issues. But this is different. This entire cycle is different. And the period of time we're living in is different, probably since the Trump victory of 2016, that the world as we knew it is changing at such a rapid rate. People say it's technology. Nonsense. It's the balance of power and what it means to the greatest nation in the history of the world, this one. And Trump more embodies the protection of that. And I think Americans do know that if Israel loses this war, which is akin to the proxy wars we had people fighting around the world during the Cold War, won by Ronald Reagan and George Bush, by the way, I might add, that if this is a proxy war and should the Israelis lose, the West is doomed, unquestionably so. I think people are beginning to figure it out. And they also, those who serve the military, remember the murder of 250 or so Marines and service people in Beirut in 1983, and they understand who's behind it. In other words, people have more information who know and understand this stuff, have more information about what it actually means and the historical sense of it, and they're not, they're concerned. And, even the Holy New York Times, I think, had a piece last week noting that the Iranians were assisting behind the scenes in the ways that people do this, or at least had the hopes, or certainly were trying to assist Kamala Harris because they know Trump will doom them. And the Democrat and the Russians, whether it's true or not, but again, the Holy New York Times reporting it, are assisting Trump behind the scenes as they can. So we have this world, we have the real forces of the world entering into this campaign in a way that people haven't seen for quite some time. And this is serious, and more serious than ever before, because the future of the West is at risk. Do people see that? I think they do, Roger. I think they're much more sophisticated than the academics and pollsters would lead us to believe.
So let me put you on the spot here. This is a tough question. We see a breakdown of, I think, party increasingly less important in the way that people vote, but still a major factor. When the dust settles, what percentage of American Jewish voters do you think will vote for Donald Trump?
I think it will be more significant than ever before. But there's a reason for it. I mean, the Jewish community has a 70%. Those who are not observant have a 70% plus intermarriage and assimilation rate, which are essentially that's a good standard to use. Those who are becoming more observant are becoming more Republican and more conservative in their behavior and voting patterns, and reject a lot of the lifestyle mandates that are being put upon people and the level of discourse. I think you're going to see a percentage. I think it'll double over what it has been in the past, unquestionably so.
So is that 25%? Is that 28%? I mean, I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Ronald Reagan did exceptionally well with Jews, as we know, around the country, especially people who are much more conservative. I think it's in the 25 to 30% range. I think that would be an extraordinary event.
That would be
the case. And Donald Trump does very, very well in the suburbs of Philadelphia.
That would truly be extraordinary. It seems to be of the major, let's call them building blocks of the Democrat coalition. Jewish voters have been since the 30s have been a mainstay. It interests me the inroads, and this is all quantifiable, the inroads that he clearly has made specifically among Hispanics. The Hispanic numbers are impressive. Many surveys showing him actually over 50% of Hispanic Americans, whereas George W. Bush had the previous high water mark at, I think, 38.9, or maybe it was 39.8. That is surprising. And then I've seen these polls that show that Trump is running more traditionally among black voters, African American voters, around 10, 11, and 12. That's not what I'm seeing. That's not what the Trump internal polling is showing. Right. He seems to have made serious inroads there.
With the breakdown of parties, Roger, which you noted before, it has become more about personalities. And with the Latinos, I don't like that word, but with voters who come from Spanish-speaking, who can trace their roots to Spanish-speaking countries, the argument is it's about values, and it's about family values, and it's about economics. These are very, very, very mercantile, hardworking people for whom family is everything. They're upset by the change in values they see around them. And they're also upset by the fact that they played by the rules and people are now being brought into the country or allowed into the country who did not. And that's a reasonable set. You can see the reports in newspapers is not stuff we're dreaming up on a daily basis and on television, talking about these very issues with respect to African Americans. The breakdown of parties, it's lasted a long time since the Kennedys. that the blacks have voted Democrat because for many years, as you know, blacks were Republicans in this country. And the change with the Kennedys. And now we've gone ahead 60 years. And that is starting to change somewhat because as the parties break down, then this becomes more about personalities. And Trump's personality as is caused by The Apprentice and other things in his life have become so overwhelming that they blot out the negatives that the Democrats might toss at him about race because they become less believable. In other words, someone you know that well who comes into your house on television can't be the racist or the bad guy that others are trying to make him out to be.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Hank Sheinkopf, literally one of the smartest guys in the world. There's literally no one in American politics that I respect more, even though we are in different parties. We've been friends for, over 30 years. We're lucky to have him here today. Don't go away, folks, because we'll be right back with more of Hank Sheinkopf right here on The Roger Stone Show.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
And we're back. We're talking to Dr. Hank Sheinkopf, one of the most legendary Democratic strategists and consultants in the country, a advisor to presidents, union presidents, mayors, governors, senators. Hank has worked in over 700 campaigns. I respect his analysis perhaps more than any Democrat I know. Well, Hank always tells it to you straight. Hank, I see a realignment in the country when Dick Cheney and the McCain family and Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, for that matter, are endorsing Kamala Harris. Yet you see Robert Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Blagojevich, who joined us today, supporting Donald Trump. Something's going on there. How do you read that?
I think Roger, I think it's rather important you raise it. There is a realignment going on in classical academic terms. Critical election theory, the BOK, I think among the greatest American political scientists in the 20th century. I mean, in the 50s and 60s, the last century, he talked about critical elections where historical events would come together with political trends. He predicted that the South would become Republican in 1949. He said this. I mean, we're going through a critical election because the parties are falling apart. They become, in the case of the Republicans, much more personality dominant with Donald Trump, much more single issue directed. Okay, and the Democrat coalition of blacks, Latins, Jews, and labor unions is falling apart because it's perceived as more elitist and more related to the financial interests of Wall Street and the elites in Washington, New York, and in Los Angeles. So when you put that together, you have a Democrat Party that is less ideologically strong over time, less diverse, okay, and a Republican Party that is becoming yet to be identified in the future, but has a much stronger group of adherents that are prepared to protect it, while everybody else is trying to figure out what to do. The working class party of the country is no longer Democrats, is my point. It is Republicans. And that is a very important thing to note.
All politics is local, and therefore I have to ask you this question. Mayor Eric Adams, under fire. Again, we stress that an indictment's not a conviction, and you're innocent until proven guilty, but he does seem to have serious problems. And he is charged with taking $10 million from Turkey illegally and then submitting that through New York City's campaign matching fund system for a 10-to-1 match. That is not the upgrade of an airline ticket. That's a serious charge. We give him the benefit of the doubt because that's how our system works. But if he should either choose not to run or be forced out, and the city moves for the first time to ranked choice voting, how do you see that playing out?
Very tough election for anybody. I mean, ranked choice voting, let me back it up. I mean, the wonderful thing about reform is that every reform has an elitist bias. So when you reform the education, you reform the electoral system, you're really making sure that less people can figure out what to do because voting is habitual and ritualistic. So ranked choice voting upsets the whole thing. It gets rid of runoffs, maybe, because you have a runoff anyway. It's an instant runoff. Is that good? It's probably not. Can Adams win again? The answer is yes, because he's not convicted, because he's an African American. If he can figure out how to deal with the crime issue, which is overblown in some ways and not in others, because if you're the victim of a crime, it's not overblown. If he can prove that he can deal with that and move those numbers down some, he's going to be difficult to beat if he's not convicted. It's why? Because he's the incumbent mayor. And the last time, let's see, in the last 80 years, only 2 incumbent mayors have been defeated after one term. David Dinkins in 1993 by Rudolph Giuliani, and Abe Beame in 1977 by Ed Koch. It doesn't happen. Normally what happens is when a guy's in trouble, the governor of the state of New York has full authority to remove the mayor at will, frankly, almost at will, takes the guy aside and says, or hopefully the woman one day aside and says, by the way, you got to go. And there was a guy named Dwyer whose mayor suddenly disappeared to be the ambassador to Mexico. Then we had Jimmy Walker, who Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, Jimmy, get out of town. And he did, but it's more complicated. Adams will win that race probably. Why? Because he's the mayor, if it were to happen, so long as he's not convicted.
Very interesting. I wrote a long piece on ranked choice voting. We could have a half an hour here, and we still couldn't explain it to people. It's that complicated. It's that difficult to explain. But everybody, in essence, gets 2 votes. You get to vote for your first choice and your second choice, and then you add them up. I personally think it's a mistake. I think it favors the elites. I like one man, one vote, plurality, no runoffs in primaries, a straight general election. But, I don't make the rules in New York City. Still an extraordinarily expensive place to run for mayor, extraordinarily expensive. And I would think that in a multi-candidate field, a Hispanic candidate, and I couldn't name who that is, but a Hispanic candidate might have the best chance of upsetting the mayor.
I think that's right, because that is the one ethnic group or one group. All urban politics is about competition between groups for resources, right? They're the one group that has not yet had an elected person citywide, an elected person statewide, besides president, lieutenant governor, which runs on a ticket. And there was no real primary there. That doesn't have a major player on the courts. And it's the time. And, if you go back in New York history of the 60s, Herbert Badillo tried to get elected mayor, 4 times? Impossible. So could the Latinos, if they come together, the Hispanics come together as one group? It's a problem. They could, but it's too diverse. I mean, many Hispanics live in Queens, but in Queens alone, you have 170 languages spoken. And you have all kinds of different dialects from people who come from all different parts of the entire Latin American universe, which people in North America seem to think is uniform and everybody's the same, but they're not. It's a problem. But yeah, you're right. That could be the only way that Adams immediately is removed. I mean, and the Asians they're not going to coalesce under any circumstance, because it's 2 diverse cultures in competition with each other economically at home and here. It's very interesting to watch, though.
Well, I'm sorry to say that we have to leave it there. I want to thank my guest, Dr. Hank Sheinkopf, a political strategist extraordinaire, for joining us on The Roger Stone Show. And also, folks, ask you to stand by, because my good friend Joe Piscopo will be right along. This guy has an incredible set of pipes himself, but he'll be playing the music of the great Frank Sinatra with Sundays with Sinatra.
Hey, I hope that's what you needed, really,
seriously.
That was
fabulous. That was great.
I hope you're doing good. You doing all right, man?
Okay, it's a grind.
You ever get up here?
Rarely. I was there for for Madison Square Garden, which was something else to see.
If you win, you'll be up here more, all right?
I think that's
probably
We'll
get together. I'd love to see you.
All right. God bless you.
Take you for a meal. My pleasure.
All right. Thanks again.
Take care of yourself. All the best.